Prologue, the last snowfall. The snow fell silently over the ancient capital of Liang. Inside the cold palace, hidden behind layers of crimson walls and flickering lantern light, a woman lay dying. This woman was Shen Yue. Once, she had been the most beloved noble lady in the entire capital. At 16 years old, she entered the imperial palace carrying dreams of love. At 24, she was abandoned, poisoned, and forgotten. The scent of medicine filled the room while snow drifted quietly beyond the windows. Beside her bed, her loyal maid Qing cried softly, "My lady, please drink a little more medicine." But Shen Yue only smiled weakly, because she already knew there was no cure left for her. Not for her body, and certainly not for her heart. For 8 long years, she loved one man with everything she had. The Emperor, Xiao Jingyan, the same man who once promised to protect her forever. The same man who eventually left her alone in this freezing palace. Then suddenly, the palace doors opened. Cold wind swept into the room as a tall figure dressed in black imperial robes stepped inside. It was him, the emperor himself. Even now, after all these years, he still looked as calm and handsome as the day she first met him. But his eyes no longer carried warmth. Only exhaustion, only distance. Shen Yue stared at him quietly. "So, your majesty finally came." The emperor stood beside her bed in silence. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then finally, he said quietly, "I heard your condition worsened." Shen Yue laughed softly. "How touching." A trace of pain crossed Xiao Jingyan's face. "You are still angry with me." But Shen Yue slowly turned her gaze toward the falling snow outside. "When I first entered this palace," she whispered, "I believed love could survive here. But this place destroys everything. It turns kind people cruel. It turns love into regret. And the people who love the deepest, they die the most painfully." The room became silent once again. Then at last, Shen Yue looked at him one final time. "If there is another life." Her voice trembled. "I will never enter this palace again. And I will never love you again." The candlelight flickered. Snow continued falling. And slowly, Shen Yue closed her eyes. Forever. But fate was not finished with her yet. Rain suddenly echoed through the darkness. Someone was crying beside her. Young miss, please wake up." Shen Yue slowly opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was a familiar wooden ceiling. Then came the scent of peach blossom incense. And finally, a bronze mirror. Confused, she stumbled toward it. The reflection staring back at her was not the dying consort from moments ago. It was the face of a 16-year-old girl. Young, healthy, alive. Shen Yue's breathing stopped, because she recognized this moment instantly. This was before she entered the palace. Before everything began. Outside her room, servants rushed through the courtyard. Then a voice shouted loudly, "The imperial decree has arrived. All eligible daughters of the Shen family must prepare for palace selection." Shen Yue froze. The palace selection. The very beginning of her nightmare. Her fingers trembled violently. Heaven had given her another chance. And this time, she swore she would change her fate. No matter what it cost. Chapter 1, A Second Beginning. The Shen residence was in complete chaos. Servants hurried through the hallways carrying silk fabrics, jewelry boxes, and trays of cosmetics. Every noble family in the capital dreamed of sending their daughters into the imperial palace. Because one imperial favor could change the fate of an entire clan. But while everyone celebrated, Shen Yue sat quietly beside her window, watching rain drip from blooming plum branches. In her previous life, she remembered feeling excited on this very day. Nervous, hopeful, young enough to believe love stories had happy endings. And foolish enough to believe emperors belonged to only one woman. But now she only felt fear. Real fear. Suddenly, her maid Chun Dao entered the room. "Young miss, madam is asking why you still have not changed clothes." Shen Yue slowly lowered her teacup. Then calmly said something that shocked everyone. "I am not attending the palace selection." The tray nearly slipped from Chun Dao's hands. "What?" Before anyone could react further, the doors suddenly burst open. Madame Shen stormed into the room with an angry expression. "Yue, what nonsense are you speaking?" But Shen Yue remained calm. I said I do not wish to enter the palace. Her mother stared at her in disbelief. Do you understand how important this opportunity is? I do. Then why refuse? Because entering the palace destroyed my life. Because love inside those walls always becomes poison. Because the man I loved most became the reason I died. But of course, Shen Yue could never say those words aloud. Instead, she only whispered. Daughter simply does not wish to marry into the royal family. Madame Shen's expression darkened instantly. This is not your decision to make. And that was the cruel reality for noble daughters. Their lives were political tools. Nothing more. But before the argument could continue, footsteps echoed outside. A servant hurriedly announced, "Young master has returned." Moments later, a tall man entered the room. Shen Mingshou, Shen Yue's older brother, and the person who died protecting the emperor in her previous life. The moment she saw him alive again, her eyes nearly filled with tears. "Brother." Shen Mingshou paused slightly. "You look pale." Madame Shen sighed dramatically. "Your sister suddenly claims she refuses to enter the palace." Shen Mingshou immediately looked toward Shen Yue. And unlike their mother, he noticed something strange in her eyes. Fear, not childish stubbornness, but genuine fear. After a long pause, he asked softly, "Yue, did something happen?" Her chest tightened painfully. Even across 2 lifetimes, her brother still protected her first. Shen Yue shook her head slowly. "No." "Then why refuse?" "Because I already know how this story ends." But she only lowered her gaze. "I simply do not want that life." Shen Mingshou studied her silently. Then finally, he turned toward Madame Shen. "Let her decide." Madame Shen looked horrified. "You spoil her too much." But Shen Mingshou remained calm. "Father always said Yue should live freely." At the mention of their late father, the room suddenly fell quiet. General Shen, a loyal hero who died defending Liang. And ever since his death, the Shen family slowly began losing political influence. That was why Madame Shen desperately wanted Shen Yue to marry into the royal family. But Shen Mingshou only looked at his sister gently. "If you truly do not wish to go," he said quietly, "then don't." And for the very first time since returning to the past, Shen Yue finally felt warmth in her heart. Maybe this second life really could become different. But fate had already started moving. And fate was not so easy to escape. Chapter 2, The Man Beneath the Plum Tree. A few days later, Shen Yue visited Qingyan Temple. In her previous life, this place had always brought her peace. The temple rested high within the snowy mountains beyond the capital. Prayer bells echoed softly through the cold air while mist drifted between ancient pine trees. Shen Yue knelt before the Buddha's statue quietly. Then she closed her eyes. "If heaven truly gave me another chance, please let my family live safely this time. And please," her voice became softer, "please let me forget him." After praying, Shen Yue slowly walked toward the temple courtyard. Snow had already begun falling. White flakes drifted gently through the air. And beneath a blooming plum tree, someone was sitting alone. A man dressed in white robes. Elegant, calm, beautiful enough to resemble an immortal. The moment Shen Yue saw his face, her entire body froze. Xiao Jingyan, the crown prince, the future emperor, and the man who broke her heart across 2 lifetimes. Their eyes met, and suddenly the world became silent. In her previous life, this was also where they first met. Back then, she slipped on the icy stairs. He caught her before she fell. One glance, one smile, and Shen Yue lost her heart forever. But this time was different. This time, she immediately lowered her head and turned away. She wanted nothing to do with him. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. The moment she stepped forward, her foot slipped against hidden ice. Her body tilted dangerously, and before she could fall, a strong arm wrapped around her waist. Warm, steady, exactly like before. "Careful." His voice was low and gentle. The same voice that once whispered love beneath lantern light. The same voice that later abandoned her in the cold palace. Shen Yue immediately pulled away. "Thank you, young master." Xiao Jingyan looked slightly surprised. Most noble ladies became nervous around him. But this girl looked almost frightened. "Have we met before?" he asked softly. Shen Yu's fingers tightened slightly. In another life. In another lifetime where I loved you until it destroyed me. But instead, she only answered quietly. No. She quickly turned to leave. Yet just before she disappeared into the snowfall, Xiao Jingyan noticed the jade pendant hanging beside her waist. A white plum blossom carved from jade. His eyes darkened slightly, for reasons he could not explain. The sight of that pendant stirred something strangely familiar inside him. And as Shen Yu's figure vanished into the snow, the crown prince suddenly realized something unusual. For the very first time in years, someone had successfully captured his attention. And neither of them understood yet that this single meeting would change both their destinies forever. Chapter 3, Avoiding Fate. After returning from Qingyan Temple, Shen Yue became determined to avoid the crown prince at all costs. She stopped attending noble banquets. She refused invitations from aristocratic families. And whenever rumors spread that the crown prince might appear somewhere, she immediately stayed home. Because Shen Yue understood something terrifying. The more she became involved with Xiao Jingyan, the harder it would be to escape the future. But fate seemed almost amused by her efforts. One evening during dinner, Shen Mingshou casually announced, "The crown prince invited me to tomorrow's royal hunt." Shen Yue nearly dropped her chopsticks. Why? Her brother raised an eyebrow. Because he requires military officers to accompany the royal party. Then he smirked slightly, though strangely enough, he seemed more interested in asking questions about you. Shen Yu's heart immediately sank. And the next morning, her fears became reality. Palace guards arrived at the Shen residence. The crown prince invites young Miss Shen to attend the royal hunt. Shen Yue closed her eyes. Refusing a direct invitation from the crown prince would be considered disrespectful. She had no choice. By afternoon, the royal hunting grounds buzzed with excitement. Noblemen rode horses across golden fields while servants prepared wine and tents beneath fluttering banners. And standing near the forest edge was Xiao Jingyan. The moment he saw her, something softened in his expression. "Miss Shen." Shen Yue bowed politely. "Your Highness." The crown prince studied her carefully. "You continue avoiding me." "No, Your Highness." "You say no," he replied calmly, "yet your actions say otherwise." Shen Yue remained silent, because denying it would be pointless. But before either of them could continue speaking, suddenly, screams erupted from deeper within the forest. A tiger. Chaos exploded instantly. Horses panicked. Servants screamed. Noble ladies cried in fear. And the moment Shen Yue heard those screams, her blood turned cold, because she remembered this day. In her previous life, a wounded tiger escaped during the hunt. And amidst the chaos, an assassin attempted to kill the crown prince. Her expression changed instantly. The attack was about to begin. Very soon, Your Highness, she suddenly shouted. Xiao Jingyan looked surprised. "Leave this area immediately." But before he could question her, an arrow suddenly sliced through the air. Shen Yue instinctively shoved him sideways. The arrow struck a tree behind them with terrifying force. At once, masked assassins burst from the forest. Steel flashed beneath sunlight. Royal guards rushed forward, and chaos swallowed the hunting grounds whole. But Shen Yue barely noticed any of it, because she already knew what happened next. Another assassin would appear from behind. And in her previous life, Shen Mingshou died protecting the crown prince. Her eyes widened. "Brother." Without hesitation, Shen Yue grabbed a fallen spear from the ground. The hidden assassin lunged toward Shen Mingshou. And at the exact same moment, Shen Yue struck him sideways with all her strength. The assassin stumbled. Royal guards immediately cut him down. Everything became still. Breathing heavily, Shen Yue stared at her brother. Alive. He was alive. And nearby, Xiao Jingyan looked at her with unmistakable suspicion. "How did you know?" Shen Yue's heart froze. Because she had reacted too perfectly. Too quickly. Far too quickly for coincidence. Then suddenly, the world around her spun. And darkness swallowed her completely. Chapter 4, A Dangerous Heart. When Shen Yue finally opened her eyes again, she found herself inside a palace chamber. Warm sandalwood incense drifted through the air. Then a familiar voice spoke quietly nearby. "You should rest." Xiao Jingyan sat beside the window holding a book. Sunlight fell across his face. And for one dangerous moment, he looked exactly like the man she once loved. Shen Yue quickly lowered her gaze. Why am I here? The imperial physician said you fainted from shock. He closed the book slowly. Miss Shen, you saved my life today. But Shen Yue remained silent. Because the truth was, she only wanted to save her brother. Yet Xiao Jingyan misunderstood her silence completely. You continue acting strangely around me, he said quietly. Her fingers tightened beneath the blanket. Then suddenly, his voice lowered. And you somehow knew about the assassination before it happened. Shen Yue's heartbeat quickened. You misunderstand. Do I? The room became silent. His gaze sharpened slightly, and for the first time since returning to the past, Shen Yue remembered something terrifying. Xiao Jingyan was not merely gentle. He was intelligent. Dangerously intelligent. Even in his youth, he already noticed details others missed. I only reacted instinctively, she answered carefully. The crown prince watched her for several long seconds. Then unexpectedly, he smiled. Very well. Relief spread through Shen Yue's chest. But before she could relax completely, he added softly. Still, I find myself increasingly curious about you. And unfortunately for Shen Yue, that was exactly what she feared most. From that day onward, Xiao Jingyan began visiting the Shen residence frequently. Sometimes he came to play chess with Shen Mingshou. Sometimes he delivered rare books. And sometimes, he arrived for no reason at all. Meanwhile, Shen Yue continued trying to avoid him. But avoiding the future emperor was far more difficult than she imagined. One evening, unable to endure the tension any longer, she escaped alone into the family garden. Moonlight shimmered across the lotus pond. For a brief moment, everything felt peaceful. Then suddenly, you truly dislike me. Shen Yue nearly jumped. Xiao Jingyan stood beneath the plum trees watching her calmly. How long have you been standing there? Long enough. He slowly approached. The night breeze carried faint sandalwood fragrance from his robes. Most women in the capital dream of marrying into the royal family, he said quietly. Yet you seem determined to run away. Shen Yue looked toward the moonlit pond. Then softly answered, some cages are made of gold. Xiao Jingyan paused. Something complicated flickered through his eyes. Then he asked gently, and if I promised never to imprison you? Her chest hurt unexpectedly, because once upon a time, he truly meant those words. But promises changed, people changed, and emperors changed most of all. Shen Yue slowly stepped backward. Your Highness should not make promises so lightly. Why? Because someone may believe them. For the first time, the crown prince found himself speechless. And as moonlight reflected within Shen Yue's sad eyes, Xiao Jingyan suddenly realized something dangerous. He wanted to understand her. Completely. No matter what secrets she carried. Chapter 5, The Fate She Could Not Escape. Winter arrived early that year. Snow covered the capital in silver. And throughout noble society, one rumor spread rapidly. The crown prince favored Shen Yue. Some women became jealous. Others became cautious. But inside the palace, one person became furious. Consort Lin, the woman who would eventually become empress in Shen Yue's previous life. And the same woman responsible for countless tragedies, including Shen Yue's death. One snowy afternoon, an invitation arrived from the palace. A royal banquet. The moment Shen Yue saw the invitation, her face immediately turned pale. Because she remembered this banquet clearly. In her previous life, it was during this event that the emperor officially announced her engagement to Xiao Jingyan. And once that happened, there would be no turning back. Determined to resist fate, Shen Yue prepared to refuse. But before she could speak, Shen Mingshou entered her room. His expression looked unusually serious. Yue, she slowly looked up. What happened? Her brother hesitated briefly, then quietly said, the crown prince requested permission to marry you. The room became silent. Shen Yue felt cold all over. So despite everything she changed, fate still moved toward the same ending. No, Shen Mingshou frowned. You have not even heard the details yet. I said no. Her reaction shocked him. Yue, do you hate the crown prince? The question pierced directly through her heart. Did she? After everything that happened, she should. But every time she looked at the younger Xiao Jingyan, her heart still ached, because this version of him had not yet become the cold emperor she remembered. This version still smiled warmly, still protected innocent people, still believed love mattered, and perhaps that was exactly why she feared him most. Because part of her still wanted to save him. Shen Yue lowered her eyes. I simply do not wish to enter the palace. Her brother sighed softly. I will help you refuse. But the next morning, imperial guards surrounded the Shen residence. An official decree arrived. The emperor commands young Miss Shen Yue to enter the palace as future crown princess. The parchment slipped from Shen Yue's fingers. Around her, everyone immediately knelt. But Shen Yue remained frozen. No matter how desperately she struggled, fate still dragged her toward the same cage. That night, heavy snow fell across the capital. Shen Yue stood alone beneath blooming plum trees. Then footsteps slowly approached behind her. You should be happy, she said quietly without turning around. Xiao Jingyan stopped beside her. Then why do you look as though the world ended? Because for her, it already had once. Shen Yue slowly looked toward him. Then softly asked, Your Highness, have you ever truly loved someone? The crown prince seemed surprised by the question. Then after a brief pause, he answered honestly. No. Shen Yue smiled bitterly. Then perhaps you are fortunate. Snowflakes drifted through the night air. And after a long silence, she quietly asked one final question. If one day, you had to choose between power and the person you loved, what would you choose? Xiao Jingyan's expression slowly became unreadable. Then finally, he answered softly. I do not know. And hearing those words, Shen Yue's heart hurt more than she expected. Because in another lifetime, he already made that choice. Final chapters, Love Across Two Lifetimes. Despite all her resistance, Shen Yue eventually entered the Eastern Palace. But unlike her previous life, everything slowly began changing. Xiao Jingyan treated her with astonishing gentleness. He listened when she spoke. He respected her opinions. And whenever she looked sad, he noticed immediately. Little by little, the cold walls of her heart began cracking again. And that terrified her, because Shen Yue understood something dangerous. She was falling in love with him again. But peace never lasted long inside the royal palace. Soon, war erupted at the northern border. Princes began fighting for power. The emperor's health worsened, and slowly, the same darkness from Shen Yue's previous life began surrounding Xiao Jingyan once more. One night, while reading military reports, Shen Yue accidentally revealed knowledge she should not possess. Xiao Jingyan immediately noticed, and finally, he confronted her. The room remained silent as Shen Yue revealed the truth. About her death, about reincarnation, about the future where he became emperor, and about the life where he abandoned her. At first, Xiao Jingyan could barely believe her words. But the pain in her eyes felt too real, too deep, too heartbreaking to be a lie. Then finally, after a long silence, he quietly asked, In another life, did I truly hurt you that badly? Tears rolled down Shen Yue's cheeks. You destroyed me. For the first time in his life, fear appeared in Xiao Jingyan's eyes. Because he realized something horrifying. The woman standing before him had already suffered through a future he could not even imagine. And despite all of it, she still loved him. Slowly, Xiao Jingyan stepped closer. Then softly whispered, If what you say is true, then this life will become different. Shen Yue closed her eyes painfully. People do not change so easily. But Xiao Jingyan gently held her trembling hands. I would rather lose the throne than lose you. And hearing those words, Shen Yue finally broke down crying. Because across two lifetimes, those were the words she had always wanted to hear. The months that followed changed Liang forever. Princes rebelled openly. War spread across the empire. And eventually, Xiao Jingyan ascended the throne. But unlike the previous timeline, this version of him never completely lost himself. Because this time, Shen Yue stayed beside him. Whenever rage threatened consuming him, she reminded him who he once was. Whenever loneliness surrounded him, she reached for his hand. And slowly, the future itself began changing. One evening, after peace finally returned to the empire, Xiao Jingyan stood atop the palace wall watching lanterns illuminate the capital below. Shen Yue quietly walked beside him. Then softly asked, "Do you think fate can truly change?" The emperor looked toward her silently. Then slowly pulled her into his arms. This time, there was no cold distance between them. No imperial pride. Only love. "I do not know about fate," he whispered. "But I know one thing." He gently touched her forehead. "In every lifetime, I would still choose you." Tears filled Shen Yue's eyes. Because perhaps reincarnation was never about escaping pain. Perhaps it existed so people could choose differently, love differently, and heal the regrets they once carried. 3 years later, spring sunlight filled the imperial gardens. Plum blossoms bloomed beautifully beside the pond. And beneath those flowers sat Shen Yue holding her sleeping child. Nearby, Shen Mingshou laughed while teaching palace guards swordsmanship. Everything felt peaceful, alive. Then footsteps approached from behind. Xiao Jingyan draped a warm cloak around Shen Yue's shoulders. "You will catch cold," he said softly. Shen Yue smiled gently. "You worry too much." The emperor sat beside her quietly. Then after a moment, he suddenly asked, "In your previous life, did we ever have days like this?" Shen Yue looked toward the blooming plum blossoms. Then slowly shook her head. "No." Pain briefly crossed Xiao Jingyan's eyes. But Shen Yue gently held his hand. "That life already ended," she whispered. The spring breeze carried flower petals through the air. And beneath the sunlight, the emperor softly kissed her forehead. "And this life?" he asked. Shen Yue smiled. "This life belongs to us." And as plum blossoms danced beneath the spring sky, it almost felt as though heaven itself had finally granted two lost souls the ending they always deserved. Ending narration. Some love stories end in tragedy. Others are given a second chance. Shen Yue crossed 2 lifetimes carrying pain, regret, and memories she could never forget. Yet in the end, she learned something important. Fate may repeat itself, but people can still choose differently. And sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do is dare to love again. The end. Thank you for watching. Like, share and subscribe Miss Novella.